I'll pay $10 million for these flowers if you serve me in Arabic, laughed the billionaire and was shocked. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The air in the exclusive Manhattan restaurant was filled with the quiet hum of luxury. The clink of fine china, the soft murmur of high-profile businessmen and women, the occasional burst of laughter that echoed through the walls. All of it painted the picture of a world where power, money, and privilege flowed freely. But amid this crowd of elite figures, one woman moved quietly, unnoticed by most. Maria was a waitress, but she was different from the others. She wasn't intimidated by the opulent surroundings. She had learned long ago that wealth and status didn't impress her. She wasn't here to make friends with millionaires or to chase after tips. Her job was simply a means to an end, a way to support her mother back home in the small town where she had grown up. Maria's world was small, but it was honest. She knew the value of hard work, the importance of making ends meet, and the quiet dignity that came with it. But today, she would face a challenge she never saw coming. As she moved gracefully between the tables, balancing trays of perfectly plated dishes, her eyes caught a man seated alone at a corner table. He was a figure she had seen around before, Jack Anderson, a billionaire tech mogul known for his ruthless business strategies and larger-than-life presence. His reputation for dismissing people as beneath him was well known. Maria had never interacted with him directly, but she had heard the whispers about him. He was a man who valued power above all else. Today, however, Jack was about to test that power in a way that would leave him shocked. As Maria approached his table with a fresh bottle of sparkling water, Jack barely glanced up from his phone. He was dressed impeccably, his suit so sharp it could cut glass, his watch likely worth more than her entire year's salary. He waved her over, a smirk playing on his lips as he set his phone down. I'll pay $10 million for these flowers if you serve me in Arabic, he said, his voice dripping with amusement. His words hung in the air like a challenge. Maria paused for a moment, not understanding the request. Arabic? She barely knew the language. But she had seen enough of the world to understand when someone was making a joke at their expense. She didn't respond immediately, simply setting the bottle down and giving him a polite smile. She had learned not to react hastily. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to make a mockery of her, but something about this particular challenge made her pause. Jack laughed, clearly enjoying the power he had over the situation. He leaned back in his chair, expecting her to crumble under the pressure, to stumble over her words, to beg for the $10 million. But what happened next would leave him stunned, frozen in shock. Maria looked at him steadily, her blue eyes sharp, betraying no hint of the unease she had felt a moment before. With a calmness that surprised even her, she spoke, her words flowing effortlessly in perfect Arabic. You just insulted me, but I won't take the bait. I'll serve you, but I'm not here to play your games. Jack's jaw dropped. He stared at her, taken aback by her response. This woman, this waitress, had just spoken the language he had assumed she would be clueless about. He blinked, trying to process what had just happened. He had expected a meek reaction, maybe an apology, or at best, a shy attempt to laugh off his challenge. But Maria didn't back down. She didn't falter. In that brief exchange, she had proven that she wasn't like the others. She was not going to be a puppet for anyone's amusement. Jack leaned forward, intrigued but also embarrassed. You speak Arabic? He asked, his tone now less mocking and more curious. Maria simply nodded, her face remaining composed. Yes, I do, she said. I studied linguistics before I came here, but that's not important. What's important is that you treat people with respect, no matter where they come from. I was just about to leave the table when Jack finally broke the silence, his voice quieter than before. I didn't expect that, he admitted, his tone no longer playful but genuinely intrigued. His gaze locked onto mine, like he was seeing me for the first time. The usual arrogance had melted away, replaced by something else, curiosity, maybe even respect. I could feel the weight of his gaze, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly placed the wine glass in front of him, maintaining my professional smile. I get that a lot. I replied, my voice even. But there was a quiet pride in the words. I had nothing to prove to him. I had nothing to prove to anyone. I had learned that the hard way. You surprise me, Jack continued, leaning back in his chair, clearly weighing his next words carefully. Most people, when they're in my presence, they just try to impress me. You didn't do that. You didn't back down. And you spoke perfect Arabic, too. I nodded, not wanting to get into the details. I hadn't come here for validation, and I wasn't going to explain myself to him. I don't try to impress anyone, I said softly, my eyes meeting his. I just do my job. Jack's expression softened. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something vulnerable behind his cool demeanor. You're different, he said, almost to himself. I could tell he wasn't just talking about me speaking Arabic. There was something in the way I held myself, in the way I had responded to his challenge. He had expected me to crumble under the pressure, to laugh off his joke or beg for the money. But I had done neither. I had simply answered, calmly and without hesitation. And that was what had thrown him off. Jack sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation lingering between us. I'd like to know more about you, he said, breaking the silence again. Not just the waitress. There's more to you, isn't there? I paused. It wasn't often I was asked that question. People usually only saw what I allowed them to see. I had been careful to keep my past hidden, to not let anyone into my life outside of the job. But for some reason, I felt compelled to answer him. I used to work in international relations. I began, keeping my voice low. But I left that behind. Took care of. My family. Came here to start over. Jack didn't say anything at first. I could see the wheels turning in his head. I could tell he wasn't used to people like me. Not used to people who didn't care about the things he had. And now you wait tables? He asked, his voice softer now. Almost as if he were afraid to ask. I do what I have to do, I said simply, not elaborating. Jack leaned forward, his tone shifting to something more serious. I'm not used to being around people who don't care about money, he admitted. I've spent my whole life building a fortune. But that doesn't seem to impress you. I shook my head slightly. Money doesn't impress me, I said quietly. It's just a tool. It's what you do with it that matters. Jack looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He clearly wasn't used to hearing this kind of talk, especially from someone in my position. He was a billionaire, accustomed to getting what he wanted with a snap of his fingers. But I wasn't playing his game. I wasn't interested in the power he wielded. I wasn't interested in the things he could offer. And I think that confused him. After a while, Jack spoke again. This time his voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. I have an offer for you, he said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. I've been impressed by your attitude, your composure. I think you could be valuable to my company. I want to offer you a job, something more than just serving tables. I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't show any sign of surprise. Instead, I gave him a steady look. What kind of job? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Jack smiled faintly. You'll be working directly with me, he said, his voice low and persuasive. I need someone with your intelligence and your instincts. I could use someone who thinks outside the box. My mind raced, but I kept my expression calm. I had worked hard to get to this point in my life, to distance myself from the world of high society and business deals. I had made peace with my choices. But now, Jack was offering me a way back into that world, a world I had walked away from years ago. It was tempting. So tempting. But it wasn't just about the money or the position. It was about something deeper. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I'm flattered, I said after a long pause, my voice steady. But I'm not sure this is the right path for me. Jack looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. Why not? He asked, his voice no longer just curious, but also a little frustrated. You could have everything you ever wanted. A position of power. The chance to change your life. I don't need power, I replied, my voice soft but firm. I don't need things. I just need to live my life, without the games, without the manipulation. I've learned that much. Jack didn't respond immediately. He studied me, his gaze softening, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like understanding in his eyes. You're right, he said finally, his voice low. I've spent so much of my life chasing after the wrong things. But maybe you're the one who needs to teach me how to live without them. I didn't say anything in response. I didn't need to. The words hung in the air between us, and for the first time since meeting Jack Anderson, I felt like we were on the same level. Maybe that was the real power, the ability to understand each other without the need for wealth or status. I had never expected a simple conversation to lead me here. In the days that followed our exchange, Jack's offer lingered in my mind. I kept telling myself it was just a temporary distraction, a fleeting moment of intrigue from someone used to getting everything he wanted. But there was something about the way he looked at me that day, a flicker of respect that I hadn't seen in anyone else. And it made me question everything I had told myself about power, success, and the choices I had made. I wasn't naive enough to think this was an offer born of anything more than Jack's curiosity, but it was more than that now. It was a test, one he had laid out before me without even realizing it. The chance to return to the life I had once left behind was real, but so was the fear that I was getting in over my head. A week passed, and I found myself standing outside the towering glass building that housed Anderson Capital, the same one I had walked past countless times, but never once thought I would walk into. The cold autumn air stung my cheeks, reminding me that nothing in this city came easy. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the nerves that had crept up on me since my decision. My mind raced back to the quiet moments I had spent with Jack at the restaurant, his surprise at my knowledge, his insistence that I could offer something his team lacked. I hadn't expected him to track me down after our first conversation, but when I received the official invitation to meet again, I couldn't deny the curiosity that tugged at me. When I walked into the lobby, I was met by a receptionist who barely gave me a second glance. I had become used to being invisible in places like this, and it didn't bother me anymore. But today, everything felt different. As I stood in the elevator, making my way up to the 87th floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change in a way I wasn't fully prepared for. I had never been one to chase after the superficial world of high finance. But something about this was more than just an opportunity for money. I could feel it. I was about to walk into a world where power didn't just come from numbers on a page or the balance of a bank account. It came from connections, from the ability to understand people and influence their decisions. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped into the sleek, modern office space. The sharp contrast of the polished floors against the cold glass walls almost too much to take in. As I walked past rows of analysts hunched over their screens, the buzz of efficiency and urgency was overwhelming. I had never imagined myself in a place like this, and yet, here I was. The door to Jack's office was open, and I could see him sitting behind his massive desk, speaking with someone who appeared to be one of his assistants. He looked up as I entered, his face breaking into a familiar, reserved smile. "Christina," he greeted me, his voice low but warm. "Thank you for coming." I gave a slight nod, unsure of what to say. "Of course," I replied, trying to sound composed. I wasn't sure what had brought me here. I wasn't sure if I even belonged in this world anymore. But I couldn't back down now. "You made quite the impression on me last week," Jack continued, his eyes scanning me with a level of scrutiny I wasn't entirely comfortable with. "I've been thinking about it, and I'm convinced you can offer something that my team can't. A perspective that's unique. You've been away from the world of finance, but that doesn't mean you don't have something valuable to contribute." I sat down across from him, my mind racing. His words felt like a challenge, but also an invitation. I wasn't here to play games, but the reality of the situation was impossible to ignore. The truth was, I had left this world for a reason. I had turned my back on the high-stakes, fast-paced world of finance because I didn't want to be a part of the system that valued money over people. But now, Jack was offering me the chance to return to it, and it was tempting. Tempting in a way I hadn't expected. He sat back in his chair, his gaze never leaving mine. "I want to offer you a position as a consultant for Anderson Capital," he said, the words hanging in the air. "I'm offering you the opportunity to work directly with me, to help shape some of the major deals we're working on. Your insight, your instincts, there's value in that, Christina." I couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in my chest. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a lifeline. The kind of lifeline I had sworn I would never take again. But here it was, right in front of me. The chance to return to everything I had once walked away from. I had worked so hard to get out of that world, to build a life on my own terms. But now, Jack Anderson was offering me the chance to get back in. And as much as I wanted to say no, as much as I tried to convince myself that I had nothing to prove, the truth was, the temptation to accept was stronger than I had anticipated. I sat in Jack's office, staring at the sleek, modern decor around me, trying to take in everything that was happening. His offer lingered in the air, pulling at me in a way I hadn't expected. I had walked away from this world before. This world of high finance, cutthroat deals, and endless power plays. But now, here I was, sitting across from the man who could offer me a way back. I wasn't sure if I was ready to go down that path again, but something in me couldn't ignore the pull. Jack was still watching me, his eyes piercing, waiting for my response. "Take your time," he said softly, almost as if sensing the battle I was fighting in my mind. "This isn't an easy decision, I get it. But you need to know, I'm serious about this. You have a skill set that's valuable, something my team can't provide. I want you to help me, help us, move forward." His words lingered in the room, but I didn't know how to respond. A part of me was still hesitant. The world he was offering me was the world I had left behind, and I had good reasons for leaving it. But another part of me, the part that had seen the way he looked at me the other day, the respect in his eyes, wanted to believe he wasn't just offering me a job. He was offering me something else, something bigger. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice steady but unsure. "I've worked hard to get away from this world, Jack. I left it behind because I couldn't stand the games, the manipulation. I couldn't live in a world where money was everything." Jack's expression softened, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I understand," he said quietly. "But this isn't about money, not really. It's about making a difference, using what you know to actually change things. You don't have to play the game the way everyone else does. You can do it on your terms." I felt a twinge of doubt. And how am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to believe that you're not just looking for another pawn to control? Jack leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "I'm not looking for a pawn. I'm looking for someone who can teach me something. Someone who can help me see beyond the numbers, beyond the deals. Someone who can help me see the bigger picture." His words hit me like a revelation. Maybe that was the difference. Maybe, just maybe, Jack wasn't like the others. Maybe he wasn't just playing the same old power games that I had grown so tired of. But how could I be sure? The doubt gnawed at me, pulling me in different directions. I had always believed in my instincts, but this time, my instincts were confused. "I don't know, Jack," I said, my voice quieter now. "I don't know if I can go back to that world. I've seen too much. I've sacrificed too much. I don't know if it's worth it." Jack's expression shifted, and for the first time since I had met him, he seemed genuinely vulnerable. "I can't promise you everything," he said slowly. "I can't promise that this will be easy, or that you won't have to make hard choices. But I can promise you that this will be different. We can make it different, if you're willing to try." The weight of his words settled over me. He wasn't asking me to trust him blindly. He was asking me to take a chance, to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could do something together that would change the way things were done. Something that could make a real difference. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. I saw the ambition in his eyes, but also something else. Something that hinted at a deeper desire to do more than just win, more than just accumulate wealth and power. It was the kind of desire I had always admired but never thought I would find in someone like him. "What's the first step?" I asked, my voice quieter now, as if I had already made the decision but was still trying to convince myself. Jack smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen from him. "The first step is you saying yes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The decision hung between us, but something inside me had already shifted. This wasn't going to be easy, and I wasn't going to let myself be fooled by the glitz and glamour of this world. But maybe, just maybe, I could make a difference here. Maybe I could do something that mattered. "Yes," I said finally. "I'll do it." Jack's smile widened, and he stood up, extending his hand toward me. "Welcome to Anderson Capital, Christina." I shook his hand, feeling the weight of the decision settle in. I didn't know where this path would take me, but I knew one thing for sure. It was going to be a journey that would change everything. For both of us. I had taken the plunge. I had said yes, and now I was walking into a world that felt both familiar and completely foreign. My first day at Anderson Capital was overwhelming. The building itself was a maze of glass and steel, each floor more impressive than the last. The sleek, minimalist design screamed power, and the people who worked there walked with the kind of confidence I hadn't encountered in years. I had been hired as a consultant, which still felt surreal. But today was about to change everything for me. Jack had promised me a role where I could make an impact. I wasn't entirely sure what that meant yet, but I was ready to find out. As I walked through the office floor, I was introduced to a team of analysts who were clearly experts in their field. They barely acknowledged me, too busy staring at multiple screens, poring over numbers that made my head spin. I wasn't used to this level of intensity. I had spent so many years removed from the world of high finance that it felt like I was diving into an ocean I barely remembered how to swim in. But I was determined. I had worked my way up before, and I would do it again. I had learned that success wasn't just about being in the right place at the right time. It was about knowing when to take a chance, even if it meant stepping out of your comfort zone. Jack found me later that morning as I sat quietly in a meeting room, reviewing some of the preliminary reports his team had provided me with. He knocked on the door lightly before entering, his presence immediately filling the space. "How are you finding things so far?" he asked, his tone light but expectant. I looked up from the documents, meeting his gaze. "It's overwhelming," I admitted, feeling a little vulnerable. "But I'm getting the hang of it." Jack smiled, clearly pleased with my response. "Good. We need people who are willing to dig in and learn. We've got big plans, and I'm glad you're a part of them." He paused for a moment, then added, "There's something I need you to look at. I think you'll be perfect for this." He handed me a folder, and I opened it slowly, my curiosity piqued. Inside was a collection of documents, all related to a potential acquisition Anderson Capital was considering. The company in question was a tech startup with high potential, but there were issues. Their books didn't add up, and their projections seemed overly optimistic. I skimmed through the information, feeling the familiar spark of intrigue that had always driven me in my previous career. Something about the numbers didn't sit right, and I knew I had to dig deeper. "I want you to take a closer look at this," Jack said, leaning over the table. "We're thinking of moving forward, but there's a catch. We need someone who can see beyond the surface. That's why I'm asking you." I nodded, my mind already working through the possible angles. "I'll need access to more data," I said, already formulating a plan. Jack didn't hesitate. "Done. You'll have whatever you need. I trust you on this." As he left the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement building in my chest. This was the challenge I had been waiting for. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about impressing Jack or anyone else in the office. It was about proving to myself that I still had what it took to thrive in this world. The rest of the day was a blur of meetings, numbers, and projections. I found myself buried in data, dissecting every report, comparing trends, looking for any hint of irregularities. By the time the office was starting to clear out, I had found something. A discrepancy in the numbers, a potential red flag that could mean the company was overstating its growth potential. I knew I had to present this to Jack. I gathered my notes and walked over to his office, my heart racing. When I entered, Jack was on the phone, but he quickly waved me in. I took a deep breath before I began. "I've found something," I said, my voice steady. "There's a discrepancy in their projections. They're inflating their figures, trying to make the company seem more attractive to investors than it really is." Jack leaned forward, his expression serious. "How confident are you in this?" "Very confident," I replied. "I've cross-referenced the data. They're reporting higher sales numbers than they've actually generated. If we move forward, we could be looking at a massive financial hole." Jack sat back in his chair, processing the information. I could see the wheels turning in his head. "This could cost us a lot of money," he said, his voice quiet. "But it's good that you caught it now." He paused for a moment, then looked at me. "You've just saved us millions. I didn't expect you to come through this quickly, but you did. You've earned your place here, Christina." Hearing those words meant more to me than I expected. It wasn't about the praise. It was about knowing that I had proven myself, that I could still make an impact. I hadn't just joined Anderson Capital to follow orders. I had come here to make a difference. And for the first time since I accepted Jack's offer, I felt like I had. Jack stood up, extending his hand. "We'll need to bring this to the team," he said, his tone more serious than before. "But I'm glad you're here. This is just the beginning." As I shook his hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell inside me. Maybe this was the right path after all. I walked into the conference room the next morning, my heart still racing from the events of the day before. The meeting was about to begin, and the energy in the room was different today. Jack had already gathered the team, and they were all waiting for me. I could feel their eyes on me, but this time, it wasn't the usual judgmental or indifferent gaze I was used to. It was something different, expectation. I had delivered the night before, catching a massive discrepancy in the company's books, and now, I was stepping into a role that was bigger than I had ever imagined. Jack had already told me that I had earned my place here, but now, I had to prove it again. I took a deep breath and walked to the front of the room, where the presentation materials were already set up. I could feel a slight tension in the air, and I knew this wasn't going to be a simple meeting. This was the moment where my skills would truly be tested. I stood at the podium and glanced at Jack, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. His face was neutral, but his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He was counting on me. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice steady. "I've gone through the financials, and I've found a few things that need to be addressed. I'm going to walk you through the discrepancies I discovered and explain why we need to rethink the potential acquisition." As I spoke, I could see the reactions around the room. The analysts and investors leaned in, some scribbling notes, others exchanging glances. The tension was palpable. I wasn't just talking about numbers. I was talking about the future of Anderson Capital. This wasn't just another report. It was the kind of insight that could change the course of a deal. I moved through the presentation, carefully outlining the evidence I had gathered, showing how the startup had been inflating their projections, and how we could avoid making a disastrous investment. The more I spoke, the more I could sense the shift in the room. The skepticism started to fade. There was respect now, the kind that only comes when you've proven yourself to be more than just a cog in the machine. When I finished, the room fell silent. For a brief moment, no one spoke. I stood there, feeling the weight of the situation, unsure of what would come next. Jack was the first to break the silence. "This is solid work, Christina," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge of approval. "We need to take this to the next level." The words hung in the air. There it was, the acknowledgement I had been waiting for. But it wasn't just about the recognition. It was about the fact that I had earned my place here, and I had proven that I could do this, no matter how overwhelming the challenge. One of the senior analysts, a woman named Sarah, spoke up next. "You've caught something none of us saw," she said, her tone impressed. "This is exactly the kind of insight we need to avoid a major mistake." The others nodded in agreement, and I could feel the tide turning in my favor. For the first time since I walked into Anderson Capital, I felt like I was part of the team. This wasn't just about Jack anymore. This was about me carving out my own place in this world. Jack stood up, signaling that the meeting was coming to an end. "I agree," he said, addressing the group. "This is the kind of thinking that will set us apart from our competitors. We'll follow Christina's advice and reevaluate the deal. We're not moving forward with this acquisition." The room erupted into murmurs of agreement, and I felt a sense of pride swell in my chest. This was it. I had done it. I had proven myself in front of the entire team, and they were listening to me. As the meeting concluded, Jack walked over to me, a small smile on his face. "You did great," he said quietly. "This was just the beginning, Christina. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." I nodded, but inside, I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't expected. I wasn't just the new consultant anymore. I was someone whose opinion mattered. I was part of the team. As I walked out of the conference room, I took a moment to breathe. The last few days had been a whirlwind, overwhelming, intense, and filled with more than my fair share of doubt. But now, I had proven that I belonged here. And the journey had only just begun. I had just gotten comfortable with my role at Anderson Capital when everything started to shift again. The weeks following the meeting had been intense. Jack kept throwing new challenges my way, pushing me to think even further outside the box. He had started to trust my judgment more and more, often deferring to me when it came to crucial decisions. As much as I appreciated the trust, the pressure was starting to mount. Every deal I was involved with felt like a test, one that could either make or break my career here. But I couldn't deny that I was beginning to thrive in this environment. I was beginning to understand the rhythm of the corporate world, and it didn't feel as foreign as it once did. One evening, Jack invited me to his office again. This time, his tone was serious, and there was a hint of urgency in his voice. "We need to talk," he said when I answered the phone. "There's something I need you to see. It's big, and I need your insight." I made my way to the building, my mind racing. I had no idea what this was about, but I knew Jack wouldn't call me in for something trivial. I entered his office, and he was already seated, the usual calm confidence radiating from him. But this time, there was something else in his eyes, something almost worried. "What's going on?" I asked, sitting down across from him. He looked at me, his gaze steady but serious. "We've been looking at a potential merger with another firm. Everything seemed fine, but there's been a red flag. We're missing something." He slid a file across the desk, and I picked it up, flipping through the pages quickly. The numbers didn't add up. The projections were too optimistic, and there was a strange pattern in the spending. I knew immediately something was off. "This doesn't look right," I said, pointing to the section that seemed the most suspicious. "They're overstating their growth, and their expenses are higher than they're reporting. If we don't dig deeper, we could end up buying a company that's in worse shape than we thought." Jack nodded, his jaw tightening. "I thought you'd say that," he replied. "That's why I called you in. I need you to look into this more. I want a full investigation." I could feel the weight of the task ahead of me. This wasn't just about numbers anymore. This was about the future of Anderson Capital. If I didn't uncover the truth in time, we could lose millions. "I'll get on it right away," I said, my mind already working through the steps. Jack looked at me, his expression softening. "I knew I made the right decision bringing you on. You've got the instincts we need, Christina." I left his office feeling the familiar weight of responsibility on my shoulders. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and long hours poring over financial documents. As I dove deeper into the numbers, the truth became clearer. The company we were looking to merge with had hidden debt, and their growth was a result of manipulating the books. It was the kind of fraud that could ruin Anderson Capital if it went unnoticed. I knew I had to act fast. I worked through the weekend, compiling my findings and creating a detailed report to present to Jack. By Monday morning, I was ready. I walked into his office, the stack of documents in my hand, and I could see that Jack was already waiting for me. He looked up, his face tense. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice low. I handed him the report, watching as he flipped through the pages. His face darkened as he went through the numbers, and I could see his frustration growing. "I knew it," he muttered. "I knew something wasn't right. But this is worse than I thought." I nodded, knowing that this wasn't just a financial mistake. It was a calculated move to deceive investors. Jack leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "We can't move forward with this merger. Not now. We need to pull out before it gets worse." His words hit me hard. I had done it. I had uncovered the truth, and it had saved the company. Jack turned to me, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of admiration and something else, respect. "You've done more than just find the problem," he said quietly. "You've saved us from a disaster. I don't think I've ever been more impressed with anyone than I am with you right now." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced with a quiet pride. This was why I had taken the job in the first place, to make a real difference, to use my skills in a way that mattered. "I just did my job," I replied, but inside, I knew this was the moment that would define my place at Anderson Capital. Jack stood up, extending his hand. "You've earned more than just my respect, Christina. You've earned a seat at the table. From now on, we do this together." I shook his hand, and for the first time since I joined Anderson Capital, I felt like I had truly found my place. This wasn't just a job. This was my opportunity to help shape the future, to bring real change to an industry that had long been dominated by power and money. And I was ready to take it on. I had no idea how fast things would change after my report. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Jack didn't just keep me in the loop. He started involving me in every major decision. It felt like I was finally where I was supposed to be, not just in the company, but in my life. I had worked so hard to carve out a space for myself, to prove I was more than the job I held, and now I had Jack's trust. But with that trust came pressure. Every day felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing my newfound responsibility with the fear of slipping up. Jack had made it clear that I had earned my place, but I knew the stakes. Success here wasn't just about numbers. It was about influence, strategy, and playing a game where the rules were constantly changing. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, reviewing the latest quarterly reports, when I got a call from Jack. "Can you come to my office?" he asked. His tone was serious, but there was something else in it, something urgent. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my notebook and made my way to his office. When I arrived, Jack was standing by the window, looking out over the city. He turned when he heard me enter, his face serious. "We have a problem," he said, and the way he said it made my stomach drop. "What kind of problem?" I asked, my voice steady, though I could feel my pulse quicken. "A big one," Jack replied. "A competitor is making a move. We've been keeping an eye on them for a while, and now it looks like they're preparing to make an acquisition. It's a company we've been eyeing for months, and if they get to it first, they'll have a huge advantage. My mind immediately started racing. I had seen how cutthroat this industry could be, but I wasn't prepared for this. We were facing a threat, and it wasn't just about money. It was about power, positioning, and control. What do we need to do? I asked, ready to dive in. Jack paused for a moment, then looked me straight in the eyes. I need you to get into their financials. I need you to find out everything they're hiding. This could be our make or break moment. I nodded, the weight of his words settling in. This wasn't just about preventing a loss. It was about ensuring Anderson Capital stayed at the top. Jack didn't give second chances in a world like this. I'll get started right away, I said, and Jack gave me a quick nod before I left his office. I spent the next few days buried in research. I went over their public filings, their past acquisitions, anything I could get my hands on. But it wasn't until I dug into their internal memos that I found the piece of information that changed everything. Hidden within a set of projections was a massive financial discrepancy, one that would tank their valuation if it ever became public. They had been inflating their numbers, reporting revenues that weren't even close to the truth. I had found the smoking gun. I immediately sent the information to Jack, detailing everything I had discovered. He called me into his office the moment he received it. "You did it again," he said, his voice a mix of awe and something else, respect. "This changes everything. We can use this to our advantage. We can make the move first, but we need to act fast." My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment we had been waiting for. "What's the plan?" I asked, my voice steady even though my mind was racing. Jack walked over to his desk, pulling out a folder and opening it to reveal a set of documents. "We use their weakness against them. We make a counteroffer, one that'll put them on the defensive. We move quickly, but we need to be precise. This isn't just about beating them to the punch. It's about making sure we can take control without them ever knowing what hit them." The complexity of the plan was overwhelming, but I knew this was the kind of challenge I had been brought here for. I was no longer just an outsider in the finance world. I was part of the team, part of the plan. "I'll help with the strategy," I said, knowing I had a lot of work ahead of me. "But we'll need to make sure we have everything in place before we move forward." Jack looked at me, his eyes intense. "That's why I'm counting on you. You've got the instincts I need." I could feel the weight of his trust on my shoulders. This was no longer about proving myself to him. This was about the future of Anderson Capital. We worked through the night, crafting the perfect strategy. By morning, we were ready to make our move. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I realized what this could mean. This was our chance to secure a deal that would not only protect our position, but strengthen it in ways we hadn't even imagined. As Jack and I prepared to make our pitch, I knew this was the defining moment of my career. But the stakes were high. This was a game where one wrong move could mean losing everything. And now, we were all in. I had no idea what was coming next. The plan was set in motion, and Jack's confidence in me was clear. We had found the weakness in our competitors' numbers, and now it was time to act. As the hours passed, I felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on me. The strategy we had crafted was aggressive, but it was our best chance. I was still processing everything that had happened, from the unexpected success of my last discovery to how quickly Jack had elevated me in the company. But now, all of that was irrelevant. This was bigger than me. It was about Anderson Capital's future, and I had a pivotal role to play. The next morning, we were on a call with the competitor's board of directors. Jack took the lead, outlining our offer, a counterproposal that would leave them with little room to maneuver. He was calm, his voice steady, but I could hear the underlying intensity in it. He knew the risk we were taking. The stakes had never been higher. After Jack made the initial pitch, he turned to me, silently asking for my input. I took a deep breath and jumped in, confident this was the moment to prove myself. "We understand your position," I began, my voice even but firm. "But we believe our proposal offers a far more stable future for both parties involved. By backing out now, you risk losing credibility in the market. Our offer is fair, but if you decide to play this out in the long term, the risks for your company are significant." There was a long pause. I knew they were processing what I had just said, and I could feel the tension in the room rise. I wasn't just speaking to them from a place of business. I was speaking from a place of experience. I had seen what happens when companies overestimate their strength, when they ignore the bigger picture. This wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about survival. Jack gave me a slight nod, signaling that he was pleased with my approach. Exactly, he added, his tone sharp. We've done our homework. We've been watching your company's growth, and we've found the vulnerabilities that no one else has. You're not in a position to dictate terms anymore. You're at a crossroads. Take our offer or risk losing everything you've worked for. The silence on the other end of the call was palpable. The pressure was mounting, and I could tell they were considering our words carefully. This was their tipping point. And then, finally, the response came. We need some time to think it over, the voice on the other end said. We can't make any decisions this quickly. Jack didn't flinch. You don't have time, he said, his voice unwavering. We've given you an offer that's as fair as it gets. The longer you take to decide, the worse the position you'll be in. You have 24 hours. With that, the call ended. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of what we had just done settling over us. I could feel the adrenaline rushing through my veins. We had made our move, and now it was up to them to respond. You did well, Jack said, breaking the silence. You've got a real knack for this, Christina. His words hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't just acknowledging my skills. He was telling me that I had earned my place here, that I had proven myself. It felt like a validation I didn't realize I needed. I smiled, but it was brief. There was still a lot of work ahead. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. But this isn't over yet. They're not going to let this go easily. Jack's eyes narrowed slightly, a look of determination settling on his face. No, they won't, he said. But we've got the advantage. Now we just wait. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I couldn't stop thinking about what was at stake. I had found the key to turning the tide in our favor, but I knew there was still a long road ahead. This wasn't just about one deal. It was about changing the entire landscape, about asserting Anderson Capital's dominance in the market. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. We had taken the first step toward winning this war, and I wasn't going to back down now. The phone call came the next day. I was sitting in my office, reviewing some more documents, when Jack's number flashed on the screen. I picked it up, already knowing what was coming. They accepted, Jack said, his voice calm, but with a note of triumph. We got it. The deal is ours. The relief that washed over me was immediate, but so was the realization that this was just the beginning. We had secured the acquisition, but now the real work started. There would be no slowing down, no room for complacency. We had won this round, but the battle wasn't over yet. I sat back in my chair, taking a deep breath. I had proven myself once again. But this time, it was different. This time, I had truly become a part of Anderson Capital's future, and I was ready for whatever came next. I had never expected things to move so quickly. The deal had gone through, and Anderson Capital was in control. But as the dust settled from our acquisition, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only just begun to scratch the surface. Jack was in a meeting when I arrived at the office the next morning, but the moment he saw me, he walked over, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something more intense. Christina, good work on the deal, he said, his voice low and deliberate. But now comes the hard part. I nodded, already bracing for what was to come. We had made a significant move in the market, but now it was time to integrate the new company into Anderson Capital's portfolio, and that was no small task. I figured as much, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We need to ensure everything is aligned. Otherwise, the whole thing could backfire. Jack smiled faintly, clearly pleased with my grasp of the situation. Exactly. This is where you come in. I want you to oversee the integration process. You'll be working closely with the teams from both sides. We need to make sure we streamline operations, blend the cultures, and make this transition as smooth as possible. The weight of his words settled over me. This wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about people, systems, and creating a cohesive unit out of two very different organizations. I can do that, I said, my voice steady. I'll start immediately. Over the next few weeks, I became deeply involved in the integration process. I spent hours in meetings with department heads, analyzing reports, and identifying the gaps that needed to be addressed. I knew that the true challenge wasn't just about financials. It was about people. Both companies had their own way of doing things, their own cultures, and merging them would take time, patience, and a lot of diplomacy. There were moments when it felt like everything was falling into place, and then there were moments when I felt the pressure building. I wasn't just representing myself anymore. I was representing Jack, the team, and Anderson Capital's future. One day, as I was reviewing some integration documents, I received a call from Jack. His voice was serious, but I could hear the edge of frustration in it. "We've hit a roadblock," he said. "There's a key player on the other side, someone we need to work with, and they're not on board with the merger. I need you to handle this." My stomach dropped. This was the kind of situation I had been dreading. It wasn't just about financials anymore. It was about dealing with egos, personalities, and the potential fallout of making the wrong move. "What's the issue?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're refusing to sign off on some of the operational changes," Jack explained. "They don't think it's in their best interest, and they're dragging their feet. I need you to go in and fix this. You've been doing a great job with everything so far. I trust you can handle this." The pressure mounted. I had to step in and solve this, or everything we had worked for could unravel. "I'll take care of it," I said, feeling the weight of his trust. "I'll meet with them today and see what I can do." I spent the afternoon preparing for the meeting, reviewing all the information I had on this person. I knew that the right approach would make all the difference. When the meeting began, I walked into the room with a calm, professional demeanor, but inside, my mind was racing. The person I was meeting with was known for their stubbornness, their reluctance to change, and their sense of loyalty to their team. I couldn't afford to push too hard, but I also knew I couldn't let them derail the entire process. The conversation started off tense. They made their position clear right away. They didn't believe the merger was the right move for them, and they weren't about to sign off on any changes that would disrupt the way they had been running things. I listened carefully, making mental notes as they spoke, trying to understand their concerns without getting defensive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of back and forth, I spoke up. "I understand your concerns," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "And I respect what you've built here. But I also believe that this merger can create something even better. The changes we're proposing aren't about taking away your control. They're about making this transition smoother for everyone. We want to make sure your team thrives in this new structure, not just survive." I could see the shift in their body language. They weren't fully convinced, but they were listening. I pressed on, carefully explaining how the changes would benefit them in the long run. I focused on the strengths they had built, the value they brought to the table, and how integrating those strengths into Anderson Capital would make everyone stronger. By the end of the meeting, the tension had eased. It wasn't an instant fix, but I had made progress. They agreed to reconsider their position and promised to review the proposed changes with a more open mind. When I reported back to Jack, I could hear the relief in his voice. "Good job," he said. "I knew you could handle it." The feeling of accomplishment washed over me, but it wasn't just the success of the meeting. It was the realization that I had done more than just manage a crisis. I had earned the respect of someone who had been determined to oppose us. As the days passed, the integration process continued to unfold. There were still challenges ahead, but I knew we were moving in the right direction. Anderson Capital was on its way to becoming something bigger, and I was at the center of it all. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was where I belonged. I stood at the edge of the balcony, overlooking the bustling city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the skyline, but I couldn't quite shake the feeling of uncertainty that had taken hold of me. Everything had been moving so quickly. We had completed the merger, integrated the teams, and secured our position in the market, but now I felt like I was standing on the precipice of something bigger. Jack had made me a key player in Anderson Capital's growth, and the pressure was mounting. I had proven myself with every deal, every strategy, but I still couldn't ignore the nagging question in the back of my mind. Was I really ready for this? Was I ready to lead this company into the next phase of its expansion, or was I still the woman who had walked in here unsure of what to expect? The sound of footsteps behind me pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned to find Jack walking toward me, his expression as unreadable as ever. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low. I forced a smile, trying to hide the doubt that was creeping in. "Just thinking," I said, my tone steady. "About the next step." Jack nodded, understanding more than I realized. "It's a big one," he said, his voice quiet but filled with an unspoken weight. "But I wouldn't have brought you this far if I didn't believe in you." I looked at him, trying to gauge if there was more he wasn't saying. There was something in his eyes, a look of respect, maybe even trust, that made me feel like I had earned my place here. I'm not sure I'm ready for everything that's coming, I admitted. It feels like every time we solve one problem, another bigger one shows up. Jack smiled slightly, a knowing look crossing his face. That's how it works. But you're not alone in this. You've got a whole team backing you. He paused, letting the words sink in. And you've earned their trust, just like you've earned mine. His words were comforting, but there was still a part of me that wondered if I was truly prepared for the next phase. As much as I had learned, as much as I had accomplished, there was always the fear of failure, the fear of slipping up when everything seemed to be going perfectly. I just don't want to let anyone down, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. Jack's expression softened, and, for the first time, I saw something vulnerable behind his usually composed demeanor. You won't, he said firmly. You've already proven you have what it takes. And no matter what happens, we'll face it together. Don't forget, I'm counting on you for more than just your skills. I'm counting on your vision. His words hung in the air, the weight of them sinking in. This wasn't just about numbers or acquisitions. It was about leading, about shaping the future of Anderson Capital in a way that was sustainable, ethical, and innovative. I wasn't just here to make deals. I was here to make a difference. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Thanks, Jack, I said, finally allowing myself to relax a little. I needed to hear that. Jack gave me a brief nod, then turned back toward the door. Let's go. We've got work to do. We headed back into the office, the weight of the conversation still lingering between us. The next few months were going to be a challenge, but I knew I was ready. I had found my place here, and I wasn't going to back down now. The company was on the verge of something big, and I was going to be a part of it. We had already achieved so much, but I knew that the real test was still ahead. It wasn't just about securing the next deal or growing the company. It was about sustaining that growth, navigating the inevitable challenges, and ensuring that we were making the right decisions, not just for the bottom line, but for the people who had helped us get here. I had worked my entire life to be in this position, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in the way of the future we were building. As I sat back down at my desk, I felt the familiar rush of determination. This was what I had been preparing for. This was my moment. And with Jack's trust and the team behind me, there was no doubt in my mind that we would succeed. I walked into the conference room feeling a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in a while. The days had blurred together, filled with meetings, strategies, and decisions that would shape the future of Anderson Capital. As I sat at the table, I glanced around at the team, each one of them, focused, dedicated, and ready to take on the next challenge. But today wasn't like any other meeting. Today, we were making a critical decision that could determine the company's direction for years to come. Jack had called this meeting to discuss a major new investment opportunity. It was a tech company, a rising star with promising innovation, but the risks were significant. The board of directors was already divided on whether we should proceed. Some saw the potential for massive growth, while others were more cautious, skeptical of the startup's ability to deliver. I knew this was my moment to step up. This wasn't just about analyzing financial data anymore. It was about leadership, about making a choice that would impact the lives of everyone at Anderson Capital. Jack looked at me as the meeting began, his gaze steady, expecting me to speak. I took a deep breath and began. This company is everything we want and everything we fear, I said, my voice calm but firm. They're innovative, with an edge over their competitors, but they're also unpredictable. The numbers look good, but there are significant red flags we can't ignore. The question isn't whether this investment will pay off. It's whether we're prepared to weather the risks that come with it. I paused for a moment, scanning the room, watching the reactions of the board members. Some nodded in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jack's expression was unreadable, but I could see the subtle approval in his eyes. He wasn't just looking for someone to analyze the numbers. He wanted me to see the bigger picture. We've been in this game long enough to know that the future is never certain, I continued. But we can't let fear drive our decisions. We need to ask ourselves, can we afford to let this opportunity pass, or is the risk worth the reward? The room went quiet as the board members deliberated. I knew the decision would be made soon, but I wasn't just waiting for them to decide. I was ready to take action. I had worked too hard to get to this point to let uncertainty hold me back. Jack leaned forward, his voice breaking the silence. Christina's right. The risk is substantial, but the reward could be just as great. We've come this far because we've been willing to take risks, and I trust her judgment. Let's move forward with the investment. A wave of relief washed over me. The decision had been made, and Anderson Capital was moving forward with the investment. As the meeting wrapped up, I could see the team's energy shift. They were ready to dive into the next phase of the plan, and I knew that I had played a pivotal role in making it happen. But even as I left the conference room, I felt a lingering sense of unease. The risks we had discussed weren't hypothetical anymore. They were real. The next few months would be critical. I had earned Jack's trust, and I had proven myself to the team. But now, I needed to prove to myself that I could handle what was coming. That night, as I sat at my desk going over the details of the investment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was on the horizon. The decision we had made was bold, but the future of Anderson Capital depended on how we executed it. The pressure was on, but I wasn't going to back down. I had earned my place at this table, and I was ready to lead the company to the next level. The next day, Jack called me into his office. "You did well in the meeting," he said, his voice steady. "But now we need to talk about the next step." He slid a new set of documents across the table. "We've got a timeline, and it's tight. We need to integrate this new company into our operations quickly. I want you to oversee the process. It's your move now." I nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle in. This wasn't just about a successful deal anymore. It was about making sure that the integration was smooth, that the risk we had taken paid off in the long run. It was a huge responsibility, but I was ready for it. I had been through enough to know that success wasn't just about making the right calls. It was about executing those decisions flawlessly. "I'll handle it," I said, my voice steady. "We'll get this done." Jack gave me a rare smile, the kind of smile that showed he believed in me. "I know you will." I walked out of his office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. This was it, the real test. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to lead, and I would do whatever it took to make sure Anderson Capital succeeded. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, decisions, and sleepless nights. The integration was going smoothly, but the real challenge was still ahead. As we moved forward with the acquisition, I found myself more deeply involved in shaping the company's direction. I had earned my place, but I wasn't going to rest on my laurels. I had a responsibility now, not just to Jack, not just to the company, but to myself. I couldn't afford to let anything slip through the cracks. One evening, Jack invited me to dinner to discuss the final steps of the project. We had closed the deal, but the next phase would be the most crucial. As we sat down at a quiet table in a sleek downtown restaurant, Jack looked at me with a serious expression. "We've come a long way, Christina. You've done more than I ever expected. But we're about to face a new kind of challenge. A challenge that will test everything we've worked for." I took a sip of my wine, already feeling the weight of what he was saying. "I'm listening," I said, my voice steady. Jack leaned forward, his eyes intense. "We're in a great position now, but the market is volatile. The competition is fierce. I need you to help me expand our reach, build new partnerships, and lead the company in a way that keeps us ahead of the curve. The stakes are high, and I need someone I trust to take the lead on this." My heart was racing. This was the moment I had been preparing for. This was the test, the one that would define everything I had worked for. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice steady but filled with determination. "We've come this far because we've been bold. Now we need to keep pushing forward, keep setting the bar higher." Jack smiled, a small, approving smile. "Exactly. We can't afford to slow down now." The conversation shifted to specifics, new markets, potential acquisitions, and strategic moves that would solidify our position as industry leaders. But as we discussed the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling inside me. A year ago, I had walked into Anderson Capital as just another outsider, unsure of where I belonged. Now, I was leading the charge. I had earned this place, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me. The next few months flew by in a blur of meetings and travel. We expanded into new markets, forming partnerships with key players in the industry. I worked closely with the team, guiding them through the challenges and helping them navigate the ever-changing landscape. Every day was a new challenge, but it was one I faced head-on. And as the company continued to grow, so did my confidence. I wasn't just a part of Anderson Capital anymore. I was shaping its future. One evening, as I was reviewing the latest projections for our next venture, Jack walked into my office. He looked different, more relaxed, but still with that intense focus that I had come to respect. We're on track, Christina, he said, his voice calm but filled with a quiet pride. We've done it. We've built something special here. I looked up from the papers, my heart swelling with the pride that matched his words. It's been a team effort, I said, my voice filled with humility. I couldn't have done it without you, without the support of the whole team. Jack nodded, but his gaze was steady, unwavering. You've proven yourself over and over again, and I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You've taken us to places I didn't think were possible, and you've done it with integrity and vision. That's why I'm offering you a new role. My heart skipped a beat. What role? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack smiled, a rare, genuine smile. I want you to become the Chief Operating Officer. You've earned it, Christina. You've been leading us through this transition, and now I need you to lead the company into its next phase. I want you to take full responsibility for our operations, our expansion, and our long-term strategy. The words hit me like a wave, crashing over me. Chief Operating Officer? I had worked so hard to get here, but I hadn't expected this. It felt like everything had come full circle, like all the sacrifices, all the long hours, had led me to this moment. But there was no time to dwell on the shock. I stood up, my heart pounding with excitement and gratitude. I won't let you down, I said, my voice steady, though my mind was racing. Jack reached out, shaking my hand firmly. I know you won't. You've already shown us what you're capable of. Now go and make it happen. As I left his office that night, I felt the weight of the new role settling in. It wasn't just a title. It was a responsibility, a chance to make a real impact on the future of Anderson Capital. And for the first time, I realized that I was ready. Ready to take the reins, ready to shape the next chapter. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let anything hold me back. Experience the power of true transformation in this gripping story of ambition, leadership, and growth. From humble beginnings to becoming an essential part of Anderson Capital, this touching story follows one woman's rise to success as she navigates the corporate world, takes on challenges, and proves her worth. With each passing moment, her journey is a testament to resilience, hard work, and the determination to succeed against all odds. As she faces pivotal moments that could shape the future, she is forced to confront her own doubts, but with unwavering support, she rises to the occasion. This touching story highlights how one woman's courage and vision not only lead her to personal success, but help define the future of an entire company. With every step, she learns that success is not just about numbers and profits, but about the impact you have on those around you. As you follow her journey, you will see how touching stories can inspire us all to embrace our challenges and turn them into triumphs. When everything is on the line, this touching story reminds us that real success is built on trust, leadership, and the courage to take risks. Join her as she transforms her life and the future of the company, making decisions that change everything. This touching story will leave you with a renewed sense of determination and the belief that with the right mindset, anything is possible.